Let me hit you with the truth right from the start. Hip-hop didn't begin with money, studios, or shiny equipment. It began with kids who had nothing. Kids in Brooklyn, the Bronx, and every forgotten corner of America who turned poverty into percussion and breath into music. Kids who didn't wait for instruments, they invented them. A busted turntable became an orchestra. A block party became a school, and one human mouth became the loudest drum in the neighborhood. And if you were around back then, if you lived in those streets, you know there was one boy whose sound didn't just shake the room. It took the room hostage. A heavy-set kid with the kind of bass you could feel in your ribs before you even heard it. A kid who didn't need a beat machine because God built one right into his chest. A kid whose talent was so raw, so impossible, that judges stopped judging and just stared. Darren Buffy Robinson. The human beatbox. The heartbeat of the Fat Boys. You didn't forget him once you heard him. Nobody did. Buff wasn't just beatboxing, he was bending physics. One mic, one breath, one moment. And suddenly, the whole block, the whole club, the whole city understood they just witnessed something nobody could copy. Not then, not now. But the thing about legends is this. The world only sees the fire, never the burn. The applause, never the cost. The hits, never the struggle happening backstage. Because behind that thunderous bass, behind the gold records, behind the laughter and the fame, stood a young man carrying battles nobody knew how to help him fight. Battles that would follow him from talent shows to movie sets. And finally, to the quiet room where his body gave out years before his legacy ever would. This isn't just the story of a beatboxer. This is the story of the boy who turned breath into music and paid for it with the rest of his life. Darren Buffy Robinson didn't grow into his greatness overnight. Long before he shook microphones and rewrote the rules of human rhythm, he was just a boy born in the warm Carolina air on a quiet June morning in the late numb Saumui. His family moved north not long after, landing in Brooklyn, where the buildings leaned tight together and kids learned early how to make their own fun. That neighborhood, those cracked sidewalks, those stoops full of loud stories and louder laughter became the place that shaped him. He wasn't alone on that block. Two boys lived just doors away, Prince Marky D and Cool Rockski. They met when Cool Rockski and Marky D were barely old enough to cross the street by themselves, and Buffy joined them a few years later, around the age of Muy Bar. The three of them bonded the way only kids in Brooklyn could through football in the street, jokes that echoed down the block, and dreams bigger than any building they'd ever seen. Back then, all three wanted to play in the National Football League. It sounded impossible, but dreaming is free, and kids from the borough have always dreamed big. But reality nudged them in a different direction. They weren't going to make it in football. Buff knew it, Marky D knew it, Rockski knew it. And when that dream faded, something else was waiting for them, like it had been calling their names the entire time. Hip-hop. This was the earliest dawn of the culture, when the first block parties lit up the corners, when DJs lugged crates of records heavier than their hopes, when MCs spit verses on hand-me-down microphones plugged into stolen electricity. The boys walked through all of it, wide-eyed, hungry, absorbing everything. And in the middle of those nights, something happened that none of them ever forgot. They heard Buff beatbox for the very first time. It wasn't neat. It wasn't polished. It wasn't anything the world had a name for yet. But it hit them like a brick of thunder. A low, heavy vibration climbed out of Buff's chest, bounced through the air, and wrapped itself around the room. Marky D and Rockski froze. Kids on the block turned to look. Even older teens, who usually ignored younger boys, stopped and stared. Buff wasn't playing around. He had something. The boys started going to Buff's house after school, crowding into the small room where Buff kept his DJ equipment. He would scratch and mix records the way other kids flipped comic book pages. Marky D and Rockski rapped, while Buff built beats with nothing but breath, lips, and lungs. Day after day, they sharpened themselves, turning that little room into a hidden laboratory where the future of hip-hop was being stitched together. Word spread fast. Neighbors came around just to listen. Older heads nodded in approval. Soon they were winning talent shows, hosting parties in Marky D's basement, making a name in Brooklyn, long before anyone outside the borough knew what was coming. At first, they called themselves Hypnotize 5, back when two other members were still around. But when those extra boys stopped showing up, the trio changed their name. Disco 3. Simple. Clean. The name didn't matter. The sound did. Everything shifted the night they entered the Tin Pan Apple After Dark contest at Disco Fever in the Bronx. They didn't plan to perform, they were just going to watch. But something in the room, the lights, the crowd, the energy, pulled them onto the stage. With no music, no preparation, they jumped in. Marky D rapped, Rocksky followed, and Buff unleashed a bass so deep the walls shook like a subway rolling underneath. People went wild. Judges were stunned. Legends in the room, Curtis Blow, Mr. Magic, Russell Simmons, Sylvia Robinson, watched history happen right in front of them. That performance became the seed of everything that followed. For the first time, the world saw what those three boys already knew. Buff wasn't just a beatboxer. He was a force. The night at Disco Fever was supposed to be just another Bronx memory, another story to laugh about on the train ride home. Instead, it became the moment that split their lives into before and after. Winning first place meant a record deal, something kids from Brooklyn didn't dare imagine out loud. They walked in as nobodies. They walked out as the trio everyone wanted to talk to. Their first single, Reality, came soon after, built on the spirit of Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five, carrying the social edge that dominated the early 80s. It didn't shake the world the way they hoped, but fate wasn't done with them yet. Their managers, Charles Stetler and Linda West, reached out to Curtis Blow, one of the biggest names in the game at that time. Curtis was a giant, the king of rap, and he saw something in the three boys that others hadn't fully recognized yet. With Curtis guiding them, their sound shifted, their style sharpened, and their identity came into focus. Promoters kept calling them the Fat Boys by accident, but the nickname stuck the way good legends do, so they embraced it. They became the Fat Boys. Their self-titled debut album dropped in the spring of the mid-80s and exploded across the country. The cover was bold, the beats were raw, the humor was loud. They didn't look or sound like anybody else, and that was the secret. Jailhouse Rap, Can You Feel It, and the unforgettable Don't You Dog Me became instant favorites. For kids across America, the Fat Boys were more than rappers. They were joy at a time when the world felt heavy. And when they dropped the video for Stick 'Em, everything changed again. It wasn't just a song, it was a warning shot. The first a cappella hip-hop track to hit the mainstream. Buff stood at the center like a storm, pounding out rhythms from his chest and throat while the crowd lost its mind. The sound he made wasn't human, it was bigger than that, richer, deeper. It made Buff a superstar. Women adored him, kids tried to copy him, producers wanted him. Beatboxing had existed before, but after Buff, it had a new standard. Tour offers came fast. Pepsi deals followed. They joined the Fresh Fest tour with Run DMC, Houdini, Nucleus, and Curtis Blow. These were giants of the culture, and the Fat Boys stood right beside them, proving they belonged. Russell Simmons hadn't wanted them on the lineup at first. He didn't think they were on the same level. After the tour, nobody said that again. Television noticed too. They became only the second rap act to land on MTV. They did commercials, Swatch watches, of all things, and entered living rooms across America. Suddenly, they weren't just Brooklyn kids anymore. They were national icons. Then came The Fat Boys Are Back, their second album. The title wasn't a statement, it was a celebration. Pump It Up, and the title track confirmed what fans already felt. The trio had become a culture within the culture. And Hollywood noticed. The producers of Crush Groove, a movie inspired by Russell Simmons and Run DMC, brought them in. Not because the story needed them, but because the film needed their energy, their humor, their soul. From the screen to the speakers, they stole scenes. All You Can Eat turned into comedy gold. Shelley E. shined. Blair Underwood carried the lead. And through it all, the Fat Boys walked like they were born for this world. Success kept climbing. Album after album. Hit after hit. Crowds screaming their names. Beatboxing reaching every corner of the country. For a while, it felt like nothing could stop them. But fame has two faces. One bright enough to blind you, and one dark enough to swallow you whole. But success, no matter how bright, always comes with shadows. And for the Fat Boys, those shadows grew slowly, first as whispers, then as arguments, then as something no group could hide from. Right after the glow of Crush Groove, while fans still filled arenas and kids memorized Buff's every beat, the world of hip-hop began to shift. The culture was changing. New voices were rising. The innocence of the early years was fading, replaced by a harder, sharper edge. The Fat Boys dropped their third album, Big and Beautiful, and it did well enough to keep them on the charts. But behind the scenes, things were not as smooth. They were in the middle of switching record labels, and the promotion didn't hit the way it used to. The machine behind them wasn't pushing with the same force, and in the music business, momentum is everything. Still, Hollywood came calling. Warner Brothers offered them a 3-picture deal, a chance to turn comedy and hip-hop into something bigger. That first film, Disorderlies, made them the first rap group ever to star in their own major motion picture. It should have been the beginning of a new era. But the movie didn't make the money the studio hoped for. The other 2 films never made it out of development, and when the checks slowed down, so did the patience. Their 4th album, Crushin', brought them platinum success with Wipeout, a playful remake that soared on the charts. But not everyone loved the direction. Some fans said they were selling out, chasing mainstream pop with Beach Boys samples and commercial-friendly hooks. Hip-hop purists wanted rawness. The streets were demanding something else. And gangster rap, louder, darker, more aggressive, was rising fast. Inside the group, pressure thickened. Arguments broke out over money, over the image, over the name itself. Their managers wanted them to stay the Fat Boys, both in brand and in body. They pushed food at them, held onto the gimmick, and discouraged the weight loss that Buff and Roxy badly needed. Marky D argued against the direction, against the pop sound, against the control. His voice got louder. Their management didn't like that. Then came the moment that cracked everything open. The managers convinced Buff and Roxy to vote Prince Marky D out of the group, one of the coldest moves in early hip-hop history. Marky D later said he walked away, broke, devastated, with no plan. But Buff, big-hearted Buff, showed up with buckets of fried chicken and a stack of cash to hold his brother down. That was who he was, a star on stage, but a soft soul when the lights went off. The group tried to continue without Marky D, but the magic wasn't the same. They dropped an album as a duo, Buff and Roxy, under the name Mac Daddy, but the world didn't move. Hip-hop was no longer the playful, dance-heavy landscape that welcomed the Fat Boys. A new era had come, and they were fading into the background. And as the spotlight dimmed, Buff's weight climbed. Without touring, without the constant movement that kept him going, he stayed home more, ate more, fought private battles no one around him could stop. The industry was moving on, and so was life. But Buff, once the heartbeat of an entire generation, was slowly losing his rhythm. The fall had begun long before anyone realized it. When the spotlight finally drifted away from the Fat Boys, America reacted the way it always does when an era ends, half with nostalgia, half with indifference. For the older heads, who grew up in the early days of hip-hop, Buff wasn't just a beatboxer, he was the sound of their youth. He was the deep rumble that shook block parties, the voice that filled basements, the heartbeat beneath the laughter. But for a younger generation, stepping into rap during the rise of gangster music, the playful spirit of the Fat Boys felt like a relic from a different world. Across the country, people had mixed feelings about where the culture was heading. Some believed hip-hop needed to evolve, to tell darker truths, to match the reality of the streets. Others felt something precious had been lost, the joy, the humor, the innocence that once made the music feel like summer afternoons and open fire hydrants. And Buff, whether he wanted it or not, became a symbol of that lost era. As his health declined and his presence faded from television and radio, a quiet sadness settled over those who remembered what he had given. People whispered about how the industry had chewed him up, how management had pushed an unhealthy image, how nobody around him knew how to help him slow down or heal. The same country that once cheered for him now watched from a distance, unsure of how to talk about a legend who no longer looked like the hero they remembered. In the broader black community, Buff's struggle hit differently. There was an understanding, spoken and unspoken, about what it means to be the funny one, the big one, the one everyone expects to be strong even when you're breaking inside. People saw the weight he carried, not just on his body, but on his spirit, and many recognized the loneliness hidden behind his jokes, the pressure hidden behind the applause. There were conversations about body image, about health, about how fame can trap artists inside versions of themselves they can't escape. There were debates about the role management played, about the silence around mental health, about how black entertainers are often asked to perform their pain for profit while never being offered the safety to heal it. And beneath all the noise was a simple truth. Buff was loved, not just by fans, but by a culture that understood what he represented. His sound was part of the foundation. His laughter was part of the early language of hip-hop. His presence told a generation of kids that they didn't need to fit the mold, they could be themselves and still change the world. Even in his absence, even in the silence that followed his last breath, Buff's legacy lived on. Every time someone beatboxed on a street corner, every time a kid tried to mimic that thunderous bass with nothing but breath and courage, Buff's spirit returned alive, loud, unforgettable. Some stories don't fade, they echo. They settle into the marrow of a culture and refuse to leave, because they carry more than memories, they carry truth. The life of Darren Buffy Robinson is one of those stories. Not because it ended too soon, not because fame slipped away, but because it captures the fragile balance between joy and struggle that so many artists live with in silence. Buff came into this world with a gift, one that could shake a room, lift a mood, and make strangers feel like family. He took something simple, breath, and turned it into thunder. He took laughter and made it into legacy. He stood on stages across America and proved that beauty doesn't need polish and talent doesn't need permission. And even when the world around him changed, when tastes shifted and the spotlight moved on, he stayed true to the spirit he had from the beginning. But behind the brilliance was a man carrying weight far heavier than what fans could see. The pressure to keep the act alive. The expectations about his body. The whispers about his image. The battles with health, with loneliness, with the quiet kind of sadness that fame never protects anyone from. Buff fought those battles the way most men do, quietly, stubbornly, hoping strength would be enough. Some stories end without closure, but dignity doesn't need applause. Buff left more than music behind. He left proof that the heart of hip-hop was never built on charts or trends. It was built on imagination, community, and courage. Every young kid who ever stood in front of a cheap mic and tried to make magic with their mouth carries a piece of him. Every laugh in a crowded basement. Every beat in a cold subway tunnel. Every breath turned into rhythm. To anyone out there who has ever felt overlooked, underestimated, or boxed into an image that didn't belong to you, we see you. Your worth is not defined by the roles the world tries to assign. Your legacy is built in the moments people remember long after you leave the room. If Buff's story moved you, challenged you, reminded you of the roots of this culture, let your voice be part of the conversation. Share your memories. Share your thoughts. Share what hip-hop meant to you back when it was still young, still wild, still pure. Thank you for walking through this journey. Rest in power to a legend whose beat never truly stopped. And until the next story, stay safe, stay aware, and keep the culture alive.